Namaste, this is Aisha, and today in this video I would like to speak about what does woke mean, okay? And this is a term that has gained a lot of attention across the world, especially in recent years, and it's not only among the spiritual community, not only among people who understand these terms before. It's pretty much become a trend, like everything else, like yoga, like Reiki, and a lot of other things. So, what does woke mean? From a spiritual point of view, I mean, we go back. We have humanity has a very, very deep past, and spirituality is not something that is exclusive. It is very inclusive, and therefore, regardless of what your faith is, regardless of what your background is or how your past was or who you are today, at some point we all do awaken spiritually. So when there is a huge trend going around across the world right now where a lot of people are claiming to be woke, there naturally tends to be some confusion. So what does woke mean? Does woke mean that they are more superior all of a sudden, or enlightened beings? Does it mean that they pretty much have the ability to control others or even judge others? So what does woke actually mean? Now, as opposed to what it has been perceived as by the masses today, when we go back in history, spirituality, as I said, is a way of life, and it was not exclusive to any particular faith or following, and it is an experience that every soul goes through at some point, and not necessarily in every incarnation. If your mission requires that you are spiritually awakened in a particular incarnation, you will be. So otherwise, you will have what we call as an instinct. We will still need the third eye for survival. So you will be equipped, innately equipped with your spiritual abilities, but to use them spiritually, to be spiritually aware. All right, that is the best way to describe what woke means, is to be spiritually aware. And that is what it always meant. That when a person is spiritually awakened, you have an experience of wakening up to an awareness that was not there before. Now, let me also add this, that there have been people who ask me this question. So why is it that some people are able to have these supernatural experiences since, say, childhood, and they may not necessarily be spiritually awakened? Now, spiritual awakening does not mean that you tend to suddenly start to see spirits or vice versa. It's not how it works. You do not need to be spiritually awakened to have supernatural experiences. For the most cases, there are supernatural experiences. These exposures to the supernatural occur either one, genetically, or two, because you're supposed to experience them. All right, it's supposed to add to your evolution, some value to your evolution, to your incarnation, which will later be revealed to you. Because those who, I have noticed that a lot of us tend to have supernatural experiences as children, and somehow out of fear or whatsoever conditioning we were raised in, we tend to have to shut those gifts down, and then later when we awaken at some point, most of the times this is what inspires us to awaken. We want to have those experiences again. We want to be able to analyze it, to understand it, to discern it. Okay? Now, what I wanted to say especially is that when somebody has a spiritual awakening, now there is, how do I say it? Every one of us evolves differently. So an awakening means different things for different people. But the most common, the basic, the primary, the elementary trait that one sees is the change of perception that comes with the awareness, the awakening. Awakening means to rise from sleep. The sleep state does not in any way make a person inferior to the one who has awakened. You are not an enlightened being. All right? So you're not an enlightened being, but you have awakened from sleep, the sleep state, the subconscious sleep state. All right? The awareness that you're a spiritual being, the awareness that there's more than what our reality presents to us. So you are not automatically superior to a person who is still unawakened. In fact, you just woke up. It's like walking through a specific door that has been waiting for you. So that door opens and you start to see a new world, a new perception of the reality that you have lived in, as what they call as the matrix. So that does not mean that you're enlightened. Okay? Because even then, you have only pretty much walked through that door and there's still many milestones to cover. Okay? So even for some ascended beings who have come again to incarnate, they will go through that experience themselves in their own, based on their own awareness, based on their own evolution. But it won't be instant. It takes a little time for them to get it. So when people say that I'm woke, when someone says to you I'm woke, and then they go on making these judgments and these angry statements, or things that don't seem right to you, I don't want you to feel that this is the right way to think for a person as soon as you are spiritually awakened. All right? That does not mean that you have the right to immediately claim superiority over everybody else and everything else and think that whatever you're thinking and feeling is immediately right. Okay? And so an awakened person is just someone who has gained the awareness of aligning with their higher self. They've just started that journey. So there is no need to be feeling intimidated or feel like this is some kind of competition or some people are better than others. There's nothing like it. So don't get confused with that. Now, what I want you to understand is being woke means that you will still carry forward some of your, or almost all of your personality traits. All right? And along the way, one learns to discern, to understand, to accept, to forgive, to forget, to heal. So it's a process for everybody. Okay? So nobody's perfect here. Nobody's expected to be perfect here. So evolving takes time. Ascension takes time. Enlightenment doesn't happen when the person is alive here. The enlightened being is not enlightened per se when in an incarnation. They too become a part of the evolution cycle. So once they have done whatever mission they have come here to complete, and then they go back, the moment they have crossed over is when that alignment, that awareness of being an enlightened being comes in. It doesn't mean that when the person is alive, they're not aware that they are an enlightened being. It's just that they don't require all of their powers here in a lower vibrational plane. Okay, so they basically learn a lot of things just like you and me, and they keep growing along with everyone else and accomplish their mission along the way. So they do have tougher missions than regular newly awakened people. So let there not be any confusion. Now, just because we see a lot of people creating these lots of, how do I say it, conflicts, emotional conflicts, physical conflicts across the world now, under the label that I am woke, or we are woke, or there is mass awakening. Now, mass awakening does not mean that it doesn't have to be an influence. An awakening is not an influence. It's not a physical influence. It's not an emotional influence. Awakening is an individual journey, an individual awareness. So what you feel inside, most of us, if you remember how your journey started as when you have awakened, most of the time it is a process. You see, you start to observe some changes inside of you and the way you feel about things and the way you feel about people, situations. So you grow into that on your own. You don't get influenced by others. Okay, this, I think I need to join the group to be in the club. That is not how awakening happens. Awakening happens when the awakening happens from within. This is not religion or any other system in the matrix. It is a universal code of awakening, where it comes from inside of you and then it cascades to the outside. It's not from the outside to the inside. So when they say there's a mass awakening, if you observe, a lot of people are basically just following the crowd of whether it's judgment, anger, whatever it is. They are not really being able to see from above the clouds, the fog. I'm not saying that what they're doing is wrong. I'm not judging anyone again, because you see, at the end of the day, I feel that history only happens when change happens. That's why we call it history. It's a story. And in every story, there are changes, right? So changes happen because people cause it or environments cause it. So there has to be some kind of cause for an effect to happen, for the change to happen, which causes history, which brings it into our history. So we should not sit around. What I feel is, awakening does not come with, necessarily always with anger. But yes, sometimes I understand it is necessary, but anger can be constructive and not destructive. It does not have to be destructive. It can be just constructive anger. And the more evolved a being is, they tend to see from the top. They don't see on eye level. So when you start to see from the top, you are not going to surge forward and jump head on and start to influence people or start judging them immediately and saying you're sheeple, or calling people names and saying that if you don't follow this particular tribe, that means you're against this, or you're not evolved, you're not good enough. These kind of mentality, this kind of mentality is a very misunderstood trait for those who gain that specific awareness. It comes with spiritual ego. It comes with anger. It comes with all the baggage, emotional and physical baggage they had before they awoke. Okay, so before they woke up, they had all of this emotional baggage which they carry forward with them. And that is why they showcase it themselves. The newly awakened, woke people tend to showcase their traits that comes along with all of this, human traits that they had even before the awakening. So I'm not saying that again, that everybody is doing it. I'm just saying that if you look at it on a larger scale, for more than 50% of people who claim to be woke are either misunderstanding the entire concept of awareness. Spiritual awareness is called woke, awakening to an awareness beyond this matrix. But this matrix is not a physical thing itself. This matrix it has its own aura. It has its own energy field. It has its own outer casing that comprises of spirits who are controlling, protecting, and doing whatever is necessary for evolution to take place. So when we are only, when you claim that you're woke and you're only focusing on the within the matrix, you see people behind it. You see who's causing problems. You're seeing whoever's, the reason behind certain situations. You're not seeing what's happening on the outer shell. And that's where the peace is. It doesn't mean that you ignore situations when you're awake, but you are able to discern what needs to be provoked and what needs to be understood peacefully. If you're one of the people who are spiritually awakened and you're doing your own thing online or at home, wherever you are, you're serving still, and you don't feel the need to get out there and join the crowd of woke people, I appreciate that you've been able to discern it. It doesn't mean that it makes you better than others, but it certainly means that you have been able to discern there is no necessary need to be drawn into a crowd. Because such crowd-bearing energy comes with a lot of mixed emotions, mixed vibrations. There's a lot of anger, restlessness. Not everybody thinks the same way when there's a crowd. They may have a similar foundation, but their paths differ so greatly. Some will have no idea what they're doing. They just want to be a part of the crowd because it's cool to be awake. And they won't even be awakened. And then there are people who think that they are far superior than everybody else on this planet because they have this specific mission. So you see, there are so many people with mixed energies behind such crowds. Spiritually awakened people who have reached a point, and I'm saying that a point could be anywhere, depending on you and me. There's a point where you start to study this, observe this, and you're able to see beyond the crowd, you're able to see beyond every situation. And that is when Spirit speaks to you in that silence. And that is when we hear Spirit speak to us in that silence. And in that silence, I know that I have to remain here to calm down a lot of people who are at this point restless, lost, afraid, in pain, suffering. There's so many different kinds of needs now. And these needs will keep increasing with time. So I feel that instead of joining a mob, it is better for me to be here serving those who really need help. In the grassroots levels, in levels where they're newly awakened, on people who are, trying to wade through the murky waters of this world and trying to understand themselves too in the process. So please let's not confuse what woke means. Spiritually awakened beings do tend to go through a myriad of emotional and physical and mental changes. But you always have Spirit speaking to you in your silence. That is the beauty of it all, that you are listening to them. And that is why we are, equipped naturally by our intuition, by our third eye, and we pick up on signs. So let's understand this. There is no need to raise a sword every time. There is no need. Sometimes the fight is inside of us. Most of the times the fight is in fact inside of us. Seldom is there a need to even raise your voice. Alright? So anger, as I said, it doesn't have to be destructive. Ego has to be for only one reason. Ego is a part of the self that cannot be separated. But there is a reason for why we have an ego. It is to respect and love ourselves. When others lack, others are incapable of giving us that. So it is necessary for each one of us to love and respect ourselves. That's what ego is for. It is not to put yourself above others and mock them or judge them. That's not what it is for. So I hope this video in some way helps you to discern, to understand this better. When you get confused looking at so many crowds all across the world, protesting over different causes, please don't get carried away by all of that drama, all of that. I'm not saying it's particularly a negative thing, but if you're not drawn to it, it's perfectly fine. Not everyone has to be a warrior. Not everyone has to be a healer. And if you were a warrior in another lifetime, you don't have to be one today. I would be talking about that particular aspect of it, where in different lifetimes, souls which come from different lineages do tend to have to switch over. And that's why some of us tend to struggle with having to deal with situations which, have been patterns in our lives differently, simply because you no longer are required to fight for it physically, but it's more of a mental inner cleansing, inner healing process. So for now, this is what I wanted to talk to you about. If you do have any questions about what I've spoken, please feel free to put on the comments below. Share the video. I hope you enjoyed listening and watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you again. Namaste. Thank you.